Welcome to another edition of the Tom Green Podcast, MLB edition. Of course, we are cracking open a fresh new edition of the Tom Green Podcast. Don't worry, guys, this is Diet Coke. With us are Bruce Cagle Jr. and Johnnie Black from the Scorecrow. How are we doing, guys?
Doing well. Doing wonderful. Glad to be here.
Oh, definitely. So, I found these guys from different Twitters, of course. They're on Twitter. You have the connecting sports writers with fans and connecting sports fans, etc. And that's kind of how we found each other on Twitter. So, first question for you guys, and I'll have Johnny answer this one, is to talk a little bit about the Scorecrow. How did that get going?
Well, the Scorecrow started basically a friend of mine. He's also on Twitter at the Mage, M-A-J. Okay. He and I are good friends for years, about 20 years now. And the two of us talk sports basically 5 days a week, for hours at a time, football and baseball mostly. So we had this idea over the summer of coming up with our own website, basically, to cover football, baseball, fantasy football, fantasy baseball, and also NBA. So we basically came up with it. It started in May. We wrote our first article only about 3 months ago. So we started with that. We took on a couple writers, and it's just ballooned since then. I mean, it's grown on Twitter, and it's grown on Facebook, and, we're doing pretty well.
That's very good. And Bruce, were you hired as a writer, or how did you get involved with the Scorecrow?
Yeah, that was basically it. I mean, I went around and I like to throw stats out on Twitter a little bit here or there. I always wanted to write. I never tried too hard to get into it. John's buddy actually DM'd me directly and asked if I wanted to write for their website, and of course I would jump at an opportunity to do something like that. So I came aboard and started writing here and there, and we just started having some conversations about sports the same way. I talk to John here a few times a week on the phone, and we talk hours about baseball, football, old, new. I mean, it doesn't really matter, and that's kind of the whole entire website feel. That's the whole entire feel we have over there, is just we love sports. It really comes down to it. We like to talk sports. We like to throw the ideas around, and then I started just writing some basic things, and one of the things I put out right now is the NL Power Rankings over there, and it's a weekly article just jumping on the NL race because it's a crazy one over there this year.
Oh, definitely. And I'll tell you guys how I got into it. Years ago, and I actually have a thread on my Tom Green Pod Twitter where I talk about my interest in sports, but years ago I actually met Fox Sports writer John Paul Morosi. In fact, John Morosi actually comes from Essexville, Michigan, where I record this podcast, and one of the things he told me was that connections are key to the business. And there's another thread on my Twitter I've made about networking, which I've networked with quite a few reporters and stuff, and you could probably check out after we get off the show. But with that being said, connections are a big part of it, and as well as just enjoying the game, watching the game, and talking the game. And I've always wanted to talk the game on my own terms, and I kind of have with this podcast, as Brandon Rush, Jeff Lyons from 3 Point Stance Magazine really got me into the scene doing football. And last year around June, July, I'm like, geez, I'm sitting here doing nothing. And I thought, and the next year came around, which was this year, same thing, May, geez, I'm doing nothing. I should expand on my content, which I have now to NBA, MLB, and we're going to start an NHL show in a couple of weeks here once the preseason gets rolling. So, I also have to mention one broadcaster I've kind of really aspired is this guy, and when you guys will know as soon as I play this clip.
During the off season, I'm the mayor of Rush Street. But once the Cubbies take the field, I'm the mayor of Sheffield Avenue. Right, Ray?
That's right, Mr. Mayor.
And my platform, plenty of cup victories and plenty of ice cold Budweiser. So that's a winning ticket you bum can vote for.
Can a bum vote twice?
Holy cow! Why not? Cub fans, this bud's for you.
Now that's what I call serving the people.
Of course, I mentioned it off the air, but I'm mentioning it on the air too. Who doesn't like Harry Carey?
He makes everyone laugh, man. It's always fun listening to him say anything, honestly.
Johnny would probably tell from experience too that Harry was quite the man, wasn't he?
Oh, definitely. Definitely, he's quite the character. I mean, he was the Howard Cosell of baseball, so to speak. As far as personality goes, and
Oh, definitely. So, with that being said, on to this MLB podcast. First of all, for our first talking point, of course, the August trade deadline. Now that has passed and we have hit Labor Day, which this is being recorded on Labor Day, let's talk about some of these trades. First of all, we got McCutchen to the Yankees. Your thoughts, Johnny? We'll start with Johnny.
well, I mean, I think he's definitely the biggest name that was moved at the waiver trade deadline. It helps the Yankees in a sense that they have some depth in the outfield now. They don't know when Judge is coming back. I mean, they're playing coy, I think, with his injury, from what it seems to me. But either way, they're getting someone who, at this point in the season, has 15 home runs hitting in San Francisco at AT&T Park. Now he's going to the American League East, hitting Yankee Stadium, Fenway, Toronto. He gets more hitters parks to hit in. So I think his power is going to show. And you have to remember, he's a free agent at the end of the year. He's going to be playing for a postseason, obviously, a postseason team. I think it was a great move. And they didn't really give up anyone. I mean, the one kid they gave up, Ava Patel, I forget his name completely, but he was basically a single-A infielder with nowhere to go.
Yeah, we got Avital Avellino, looks like.
There you go. Avellino, that's right. He's basically nowhere to go at this point between Gleyber Torres and Andujar. Who knows what they're going to do with Didi if they sign Machado next year for shortstop. There's no one in the infield basically for him to play anyway. So even though he was the 23rd ranked prospect in their system, he was expendable. So, I mean, it's definitely a great move for the Yankees. And you're getting a professional, you're getting a veteran, a 30-year-old veteran, to come in and solidify things.
Right. Now, I wonder, out of those 16 home runs, how many of them were inside the park? Because you hit it into Triple's alley in San Francisco with McCutchen's speed. He could make the turn and take the extra 90 feet.
Yeah, I don't know if he had any of those this year. I'm not sure. We know what happens. I don't know. I know what happens on the other side of 30. So I don't know if he got any inside the park home runs this year, but
thankfully Thankfully, that the other side of 30 hasn't hit me yet. That won't be for another 7-8 years. So I'll enjoy the 2020s the best I can. Bruce, your thoughts on the trade?
I think it's a very good trade for them because if you take a look at the timing, too, Gary Sanchez wasn't back at the timing. He's been bad pretty much all year long. Some of it is bad luck, but he's been injured, so you can't really sit back and 100% count on him coming back at the time with the injury. You don't have Judge, you don't have Gary Sanchez. That lineup really starts to look kind of bad. McCutchen isn't the biggest bat in the world, but like John said, he's probably the best bat that was available out there. And he plugged right into the number 3 spot, and he brings a veteran approach to that team. So you have Gardner, Stanton, Cutchen, Hicks. That's still a formidable 1 through 4, and we haven't even brought Aaron Judge back yet. So when you don't give up much and you get something like that, they're patching together a lineup to try and make a run into the playoffs like they did last year. They're going to need something very similar to happen to really go deep, but McCutchen brings in a guy that you can count on to give you quality at-bats pretty much day in, day out for the rest of the year, because he plays a ton too. He plays 150 plus games virtually since 2010. The one time he didn't is 146. So you get a guy that's going to play every single day when you need him to. That's awesome.
I know. Could we potentially have Murderers Row 95 years later with Judge Stanton and McCutcheon? Oh boy.
It would be good, and the biggest thing is you don't need Aaron Judge to come back today. Would it be nice? Yes. You need Aaron Judge to come back the last 2 weeks to kind of push you into the playoffs, because they have a sizable lead in the wild card standings, so you don't have to be so aggressive with Aaron Judge.
Right. And my thoughts on the trade, of course, is that it provides a good insurance blanket for, as you guys have said, a good insurance blanket for Judge, as Judge's injury wasn't day to day. In fact, it's week to week, and it could perhaps turn into month to month. He took some swing. I heard he took 30 dry swings today, this morning in Oakland, and 30 swings off the tee in Oakland as well. So he's starting to swing the bat. So we might be looking at mid-September, perhaps, at least my opinion on his return. So with that being said, Josh Donaldson to the Indians. Bruce, your thoughts?
You know, I personally would not have went and got Josh Donaldson at all. I would have left him right exactly where he was. I watched him earlier this year, and he couldn't throw the ball from third base to first base without bouncing it. He is injured, and he remains injured pretty much every single year. Right now, He's on a rehab assignment, but it's more of a depth, type of trade. I don't think he's gonna come in right away and force at bats. They have like a 14-game lead in that division, so they are 100% comfortable. So they're more or less just trying to get big names healthy and ready to go into the postseason. And they have a very good lineup, and just plugging in Josh Donaldson somewhere behind, an Edwin, a Jose Ramirez combination, that's not terrible. You can give Yonder Alonso days off, put Josh Donaldson at DH here or there. You're never really moving Jose Ramirez, so that's never going to happen. But you give yourself another big bat in that lineup, and they don't have to. I mean, they're giving a player to be named later. It's really dependent on if Donaldson's healthy or not. So, where do you lose in that trade? I just personally, I wouldn't go after Josh Donaldson because I wouldn't want the headache myself. But they didn't give up really anything, so you can't blame them.
Might as well take a chance if you're basically getting him for nothing.
Absolutely.
In a way, kind of like how Detroit traded for Willie Castro. It's very, very unfortunate that Leonis Martin had that bacterial injury, or bacterial infection, I should say. But at this point, Detroit fans are thinking, well, we basically got him for nothing now. Prayers up. Johnny, your thoughts on Donaldson?
Well, to piggyback off what Bruce said, I mean, basically, it's kind of for the playoffs at this point. Mm-hmm. I mean, because that's where the technically the waiver trade deadline is August 31st. You just have to have him on your roster for the playoffs. So basically, I mean, because they put him on the DL already, but he's on the DL. Donaldson, and they're basically looking for a right-handed bat off the bench, or who can spot start maybe in the playoffs, against maybe a tough left-hander or whatever, if they face Cagle or whatever. I don't know what the metrics are as far as Donaldson against some of these playoff guys like a Chris Sale or someone like that. But I think the Indians, with the 14-game lead they had over the rest of the division, they're set for the playoffs. They can set up their rotation. They're basically looking for that one extra big bopper, so to speak. And Donaldson doesn't have to be completely healthy to hit a home run here and there in a timely fashion. So I think that's really what they're looking at.
Yeah, I was a big... Go ahead.
I was going to say, Donaldson's had 30-plus home runs the last 3 years, and he hasn't been healthy. He wasn't healthy in 2017, still had 33 homers. The 2 years before that, he was, putting up seasons that you dream for at third base. So the big bopper aspect is still there. His soft tissue injuries don't always affect that. If he's only DHing and spot starting type of deal, he's not throwing the ball from third to first, so almost all of his injury concerns aren't affecting to a point how he can hit home runs if they're using him only for a couple ABs a game, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my thoughts on this trade, I was a bit confused by it because you've already got Jose at third base who has had an MVP caliber season. And then I see in this article on MLB, could be moved to second, and Kipnis could be moved to a bench role, which perhaps could be as I actually know a lot of Indians fans. Tito has a lot of loyalty to the veterans on the squad. I really thought, and this may be literally out of left field, but I felt that Cleveland should have traded for Victor Martinez. And the reason is, it's his last 6 weeks of his career. He started in Cleveland. His heart literally belongs in Cleveland. Why not trade him there and let him go for a World Series to end his career?
Yeah, I could see that move. I think Donaldson's got more in the tank left than Victor Martinez. Now, granted, it's only the end of the year and the postseason. I just think Donaldson, even if he's 75%, he could still fill in the field here and there if need be, whereas Victor Martinez really can't. Victor Martinez has been a DH the past, 3-4 years in Detroit.
Yeah,
he can barely play first base. So I think the idea of Donaldson, the possibility to spot start him if need be, move Jose over to second, and either put Kipnis in the outfield or bench him for that game, being Donaldson's a righty, Kipnis is a lefty. Victor Martinez is a lefty. Well, switch hitter / lefty. But, I think Donaldson was the better move. I understand what you're saying, as far as the hometown and everything like that. And Victor Martinez had a great career. But I think Donaldson was the better move overall.
Yeah, and that's another thing about trying to work in sports is that it's a business. Sometimes things like that have to be overlooked for the duty that's at hand, and with Donaldson being a better caliber player right now than Victor Martinez, that's why the Indians decided to go with Josh Donaldson rather than Victor Martinez. Moving on to a National League trade that you could say really should have happened in July, but the Nats, of course, wanted to hang on to all their pieces. Brewers getting Gio Gonzalez and then Curtis Granderson coming over from Toronto, I believe. Johnny, your thoughts?
I'll let Bruce take this one because he's been writing the article for the Scorecrow the past 3 weeks about the NL.
Sounds good.
I'll give that to definitely.
Sounds good. Bruce, your thoughts?
So I don't mind the trade at all. It actually is a very good trade. They're one of the most active teams this year as far as when you actually take a look at all the trades they made from the preseason spring training area all the way through August trade deadline. I mean, they went to go get Christian Yelich. They signed Lorenzo Cain. People thought they were kind of silly because it seems like, when they went and traded for Scope, they almost pretty much said, hey, we don't really care about infield defense. Let's just try and mash the ball over the fence, do what we can, score as many runs as we can. I like the fact they went out and got Gio Gonzalez. I don't think he's a super great pitcher. He hasn't been great this year, but when you look at their rotation, they don't have a real true ace on it ever since Jimmy Nelson went down last year, sliding back into first base. They don't have a true ace over there. I mean, the bullpen, they're pitching a lot of innings. You can't really expect, Josh Hader to sit back and go 2 innings every 2 or 3 nights to strike out 5 guys and hold a 1-run lead for you when it's 6-5 type of deal. So they went out and got Xavier Cedeno as well to boost that bullpen. You add Gio in, you add him in, you at least have a nice depth piece to it. Curtis Granderson, he's another guy that can come in and hit some home runs while you're pinch hitting. You're in the NL. You need good pinch hitters. You need good bench bats because you're constantly going to watch these specialties come in for the next 5 years. You're going to be facing left-handed specialists. You're going to be facing righties that only, go for one or two guys because they're in there to get specific players out. So having a veteran guy like Curtis Granderson who can still smash the ball, I'll take it. And this team, they're making all the pushes to really go after that wild card position. Right now, they're leading the wild card, I believe.
Yeah, at time of recording by a game and a half, I believe, over St. Louis.
And St. Louis has been one of the hottest teams of the year. The past 2 months, they have Matt Carpenter going crazy, but you
Gotta love
have
that salsa.
the Brewers. Yeah, you have the Brewers doing everything they can to sit back and slowly better their team to make a deep push in the playoffs, or at least try to even get deep in the playoffs, because it's been a few years since they've even made the playoffs. So I like what they've done.
Yeah, I felt this was a move. Like I said, I felt this was a move that should have been made in July because of the Scope deal. I'm like, why Scope? Their infield is already pretty solid, but their bullpen isn't. And now that they've gotten Xavier Cedeno, of course, with Gio as an ace, and really the only pitcher that I could argue to be Milwaukee's ace would be Junior Guerra, but of course he's had his struggles recently. So, any input on this, Johnny?
Eugene, I mean, he's been up there too, but can you trust him?
Right. Any thoughts on this, Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, trusting any of these guys is, it's kind of tough. Their all staff is like a 4.5 ERA, including Gio with a 4.57 this year. I mean, but Gio adds the innings, which is what you touched on, Bruce. Is that he adds the inning? He may throw 110 pitches and walk 5 guys, strike out 9. Whatever it may be. But if he can get at least hit through 6 innings, it's more than a lot of their other guys are doing. And to add Cedeno to the bullpen, to lengthen that bullpen, and also to take a little pressure off of using Josh Hader, Jeremy Jeffers, and the recently called up Knebel, to give them that extra day of rest maybe on every 5th day with Gio pitching. It's those little things, those extra 5 to 10 innings in September, that if you don't save them, they could come back to haunt you in October.
Just remember Game 6 of the World Series in 2016 when Madden puts in Aroldis Chapman in the 9th inning in a basically blowout game. People are just scratching their heads, and it almost... Now, it came back to haunt them. Of course, a 17-minute rain delay saved them, but remember that famous, well, you can call it a blunder, with Madden throwing in Chapman in a blowout game.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we'll cover 2 more trades, and then we will go to September call-ups. The first one we're going to talk about, of course, Joey Bats. Philly acquiring the Jose Bautista from the Mets. Bruce, your thoughts?
I don't mind it. I mean, he brings value in certain areas. He can walk and he can hit home runs. This league is really turning into that type of era, which I don't mind because there's a lot of it. I'm not 100% sold on him personally. It's one of those kind of another little depth piece that they threw in there, which I don't mind it. It's not my favorite. He's an aging. It's like the Josh Donaldson.
I was actually about to mention that it seemed like Donaldson.
Exactly, and I mean it's just I had 30. I mean Josh Donaldson's still younger-ish at 32, but Jose Bautista's 38 years old. There was a reason he wasn't signed earlier this year. Yes, he's done well. in his stint that he's had up, but you pretty much know what you're getting from him, and if you need that, go for it. You know,
well.
John, what do you think about it?
Well, I think it's basically, like you said, it's kind of the same thing. And with the Phillies the Phillies also traded for Justin Bour, the left-handed bat, who's at this point in their careers obviously a better hitter than Jose Bautista, but he's the left-handed version of Bautista in the sense that, like what you said about Granderson, Bruce, on Milwaukee, you need those bench pieces. You need those guys coming off the bench to play the matchups just as other guys to be playing the lefty-righty matchup. Well, Philly went and got the lefty in Justin Bour. Now they went and got the righty in Jose Bautista, a guy who's a veteran presence, a guy who can take a walk. He's not going to swing at anything. And he's been in pressure situations, obviously. We all remember the infamous bat flip. Yeah. He's been in those pressure situations where he's come through. So having guys like that on your roster for the Phillies, I mean, especially with such a young team that they have, it was a good move. And again, they give up a player to be named later or cash to the Mets. Of course, the Mets will probably take the cash. But that's a discussion for another time. You know,
Jason Worth had actually...
Kapler,
Jason Worth had considered coming out of retirement, and he called every team ... but the Mets.
Yeah.
And you take a look at what Gabe Kapler can do with that type of situation. When John sits back and said they went for the left-handed and they went for the right-handed. That way you can almost mesh together one good total player. I mean, you take a look at, Jose Bautista, he's hitting 198 on the season, but he's on base 343. That's valuable. He has a 16% walk rate. We'll take that. 28% K rate. Like I said, he strikes out, he walks, or he hits a bomb. That's fine when you're only looking at pretty much that's all I really want from you at this at bat is to potentially hit the home run and give me a big play, hit a double or walk, get on base somehow. I mean, you don't give up much for that. He'll play. He doesn't have to play every day. With Gabe Kapler, though, I think he is making very good moves and putting together a very quality team up and down to really push this last bit of September. Though I think he's going to make it very difficult on the Braves.
Mm-hmm. And as a side note from the cash thing, there was a tweet from the Portland Trail Blazers. I know we're getting a little bit off topic, but relatable. They had actually tweeted a picture of a bucket of cash, and it said, "Welcome to Portland, cash considerations." So that's probably what the Mets might do to celebrate the cash that they're about to receive for Joey Bats.
Well, exactly. The Mets are still paying off Bernie Madoff.
Right. And Bobby Bonilla. Let's not forget Bobby Bonilla.
And Bobby Bonilla. And I think Brett Saberhagen is another year, too. There are a few guys with the contracts like that, but again, that's a time for another show.
Exactly. One last trade, and then we'll get to call-ups and talking about the race a little bit. The Braves getting Rivera from the Angels and Duda from the Royals. They've made quite a few trades in July and August, haven't they? Johnny, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, they're making moves, and they're in the same position that basically Philly is, making these trades, bolstering the team a little bit. I mean, they're basically in the same position. They're fighting for that NL East. I mean, neither one of those fan bases in the beginning, or any of the pundits, whoever you wanted to listen to, including myself, thought that either one of them were really ready to take that division. We all thought the Nationals, obviously with Danny Murphy and Bryce Harper and Gio Gonzalez on contract years and everything like that, this was their shot. I mean, they're ahead of schedule, and we've seen that the past couple of years. Not to just speak specifically about the Braves, but I mean, we saw that with the Brewers last year. Yes. We saw it with the Cubs a couple of years ago in 2015.
Go!
When they made it, and lost to the Mets in the NLCS.
Daniel Murphy, if you can't beat him, join him.
seems like, yeah, exactly. It seems like teams are planning for the future, but they're coming up earlier because these young kids, these 19, 20, and 21-year-olds, some of these teams hit on them, and they're better than they thought. You look at Juan Soto. Look at what Atlanta's doing. Speaking of Atlanta again, Acuna, Ozzie Albies. Mm-hmm. You got these guys. Even their pitching staff has taken a step forward this year with Newcomb, Fultonevich. You got these guys, and you mix them in with some veterans like Markakis and Freeman.
Right.
You know, they're taking a step forward a year or two earlier than they thought. So why not go for it? Why not?
Might as well. And I was really hoping that the Nats wouldn't win the division just so that Bryce Harper could go to the Cubs. I'm still hoping that happens. But with Daniel Murphy coming to Chicago, I think we have the National that we're going to get. Bruce, any thoughts on the Braves trades?
Well, Lucas Duda, he provides a very nice bat versus righties off the bench. I mean, that's what they went to go get him for. I mean, when you take a look at his splits just overall, he's terrible against lefties, so he's never going to play against lefties. Righties, though, he's slashing 267, 332, 476. That's serviceable. I mean, a 209 ISO, his WRC plus is 116, so he's a little bit above average in that situation. And when you go take a look at their team, and you take a look at the majority of the playoff teams, you better have a pretty deep bench, because we already know you're going to face a lot of guys that will throw a lot of stuff at you. And so you're going to have to be able to swap out some of these guys and put in some specialists so you can have good matchups going in those 6, 7, 8, 9 innings, because as we saw last year, managers, Skips they're not afraid to pull anybody early in a playoff game anymore. Severino got pulled in the first. I think John Gray got pulled in the first last year. A bunch of teams did not mind pulling guys really quick in must-win games. So you need a deep bench that can handle multiple positions, that can handle multiple defensive switches, and you can actually have some guys come in and potentially do well in specific situations. If you take a look at the Braves, for instance, they have 3 catchers on their team right now. 3 catchers. They need to have the flexibility, and they're already looking forward. We need to have flexibility to be able to win these games in the 7th, 8th, 9th inning. I mean, you see a lot more teams doing it. I like the trades, especially for what a lot of these guys are giving up. You see nowadays, to go get the Manny Machados, the Chris Archers, sometimes teams maybe hold a little too long. There's a lot of good players you can get out there that don't cost as much and don't hurt your team as long-term. And you see a lot of these teams, I think the Braves did a very good job trying to sneakily improve their team while they make a push.
Yeah, and I thought about the Chris Archer trade, and that might, believe it or not, that might actually hurt Pittsburgh more than help, because them getting rid of Austin Hedges. That, I don't know if I like giving up that much, but Archer is, believe it or not, worth that much when he's on. So, and also with the 3 catchers, my thought about that, they need the extra equipment for when Ronald Acuna Jr. comes up to the plate for the first time. He needs to wear like the German Knights shining armor thing, because it seems like 2 or 3 days a week they're throwing at him. I don't know if I want to be Ronald Acuna Jr. in that case.
Yeah, that was just ridiculous, but.
So, with that being said, let's talk a few prospects here, because September is known for the month of call-ups, and you guys have looked at a lot more prospects than I have, as I've been busy with my stuff. But how about Bruce? Give me a couple prospects that I should really look at closely in the month of September.
The main one I'm looking for is Victor Robles. He should be called up today, I believe. The news I've been reading is he's going to be recalled soon. They were letting the AAA team I believe their season ended on Monday. So I would be looking for him as the number one guy, just because coming into this season, everyone was all about Victor Robles. Before we were about, Juan Soto tearing up the league. We were stashing Victor Robles. He was a major stash, and nothing he's done has really changed my mind about him. He hyperextended his elbow early on, but other than that, I mean, he's the same top-tier prospect he was at the beginning, so he might be one that kind of sneaks through places just because, not a lot of people are going to be thinking about him anymore, I feel like. But he might actually crack that outfield, and they might start rolling Soto and Robles out there to see what their future is going to look like, because they started waving the towel a couple of weeks ago. So, it would be wise for them to give him some playing time. So we'll see. Touki Toussaint is another one that's going to be coming up. He, I believe, is scheduled to pitch, I think, today or rather soon.
Touki Toussaint, you're saying?
Yes.
He's pitching
supposed
today.
To be pitching today against Boston. So that'll be something to see. I'm not sure. I mean, I like the matchup, obviously, but I would pay attention to him. He might be a guy that can find himself some actual rotation spots, and actually some actual starts in the rotation, because, Newcomb has been up and down. Tehran is the same way. They don't have the greatest, aces on the Braves. I mean, Fulte, I can't say his name right.
Foltynewicz, yeah. It's a tough one to pronounce.
He has been pitching well, but he struggles sometimes going past 6. You can't necessarily. This is his first full year of pitching this good, so I don't mind kind of rolling Touki Toussaint out there and seeing what's going on. Maybe matchup plays. Not a lot of people maybe seen his stuff lately. I wouldn't, I wouldn't expect a ton, but I would keep an eye out for him, because at this point in time, you want guys that can actually start and potentially get wins or quality starts for you. Real life or fantasy, or even in DFS, any way you want to go with it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So hey, Kansas City Royals, see what the Nats have done in August. That's what you should have done in August last year. Okay? That's why you only have 43 or 44 wins, or however much they have, is because they held on to Moustakas, Hosmer, and the farm for a little too long, and look where they're at now. 45 wins, I should say. Johnny, prospects. Give me a couple I should be looking for.
Well, I'd actually, to be honest with you, I wanted to touch on the prospects that are not being called up. If that's okay.
Sure, that is totally okay.
I mean, we look at the top prospects, and you got Vlad Guerrero Jr., Eloy Jimenez.
That's a great story. Vlad Guerrero Jr. back in March, hitting a walk-off home run in Montreal, where his dad played.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's, three guys, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Eloy Jimenez, and Peter Alonso. Now, I know Peter Alonso's strikeout rate is up. He strikes out a lot. I understand that. But the guy's got 35 home runs and 117 RBIs this year in the minor leagues. He's 23 years old, pushing 24. And not only that, when you talk about these three guys, you're talking about the Blue Jays, the White Sox, and the Mets. Three teams that aren't going anywhere this year.
Right.
Now, if they were playoff caliber teams and they were in the hunt, I would understand not wanting to bring this guy up and put him in the playoff hunt. I would almost understand that. Mm-hmm. You want to bring up guys, you want to maybe get some veterans, you want to bring up guys that have a little more experience, a little more flexibility where they play and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But the fact that these three teams aren't going anywhere and they're not calling these kids up, I don't know. I mean, this is really, it's going to become, this is becoming a black eye on baseball in general. Mm-hmm. This whole manipulating the service time, because we saw it with Acuna earlier this year, not bringing him up till April 14th. We saw it a couple of years ago with Chris Bryant.
Yep, I was about to mention that
And
too
the
with Chicago.
excuse of he's got to work on his defense. Oh, because 2 weeks in the minor leagues working at third base is going to all of a sudden make you major league ready. I mean,
You're
come
fixed.
on. You know,
You're fixed.
You know what I mean? Oh, you're all good now. You know, come on. After spring training with the major league team, now you go to minor leagues and you play 12 games in 2 weeks. All of a sudden, your third base problems are fixed. I mean, I just, this is going to be an issue going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I expect grievances by the union and by these agents for Guerrero and Jimenez and Alonso especially. And I think this is going to be interesting going forward. Not to get off the topic of the prospects, but I mean, I'm just saying, I think this is going to be a very Major League Baseball issue going forward. You only have 3 more years left of the CBA. After the 2021 season, it runs out. So these things are going to really dictate what Major League Baseball does, how the union handles it. It's going to be very important these next couple of years with these teams manipulating service time. And the younger and younger these kids get when they're coming up, obviously we've seen Soto and Acuna as 2 examples. Mm-hmm. But it's really going to be interesting to see the legal side of it, the business side of it, coming up in these next couple of years, especially with this year with these top-notch prospects.
Yeah, definitely, and the situation with Bryant there, they wanted to keep him down so that they could have 1 more year on his contract, and that's another thing that's going to be discussed about with the new CBA coming up is the whole minor league for 12 games equaling 162 in the major leagues for the next season. So that'll be a definite thing to discuss in 3 years. So 3 years from now, hopefully this show will be up to ESPN or Fox or something like that. But we might be having this same conversation when it comes to CBA and those talks. Hopefully, maybe we could bring in the Mad Dog. That'd be something else we did.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. I love Mad Dog.
Johnny had some shades of Mad Dog there. I could kind of tell. I could see the Mad Dog in my head when he was talking about Bryant. So one more talking point on this show, and that is the young teams in this race. How about we'll start with Johnny? Tell me one team that will that could falter in September due to their youth, and one team that could make a run in the race with experience, I guess is what I'm saying.
I'm gonna go with my original pick. And my original pick, aside from the Nationals for the East, I picked the Phillies to win the division.
Okay.
Well, I picked the Nationals to win the division, but I picked the Phillies to finish ahead of the Braves.
Okay.
Mainly because of some of their experience. Granted, they're still a young team, but adding Arrieta to their pitching staff, Nola has obviously taken a step forward and is in the front running with DeGrom and Scherzer for the Cy Young Award.
Yes, and I miss Arrieta on the north side. I miss him.
Yeah. I like Arrieta. I didn't, he wasn't going to live up to his Cy Young year a couple of years ago, but, he's still a solid pitcher. He's a veteran presence on that young staff. Now, like I said, while Philly is still young, they do have guys who have been there a few years. Mm-hmm. Odubel Herrera, Maikel Franco, guys like that. Hoskins even from last year. Granted, it's not a lot of experience, but I just saw Atlanta as their pitching staff especially not having any sort of experience, with the exception of Julio Teheran.
Right.
And Fultonavich and Newcomb coming up, even now with Toussaint, I mean, these guys are, I don't trust Anibal Sanchez. I know Bruce is a big fan.
You don't have to tell me twice about Anibal Sanchez, that's for sure. In Detroit.
It's almost like, I don't know. I think Philly takes it. I think they hit a bump on the road, but I think they go on a hot streak, and I think they're going to edge them out. I think they're going to edge out Atlanta. And main part of that, I think, is because of Arrieta being a calming influence on that staff, and also, like Bruce touched on, Kapler.
Yes.
Dave Kapler's been good with the matchups and stuff like that overall this year. And them getting Justin Bour and Jose Bautista in that locker room with Carlos Santana, which was a huge signing this year. Wilson Ramos, who they brought in to play catcher, aside from Alfaro, they're bringing in veterans for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to bode well for them this next month. I do.
Definitely. Bruce, same question. Young team that's going to put up, young team that will shut up.
I pretty much fully agree with what John said about Philly. The thing that has been swaying me over towards the Braves just a little bit has been Acuna, because I feel like when you look at the top end of Atlanta to a point, when you have Acuna and Canarte and Freeman, that's pretty big. I like they have a nice mixture of young and veteran hitters there, but I do think that I think the pitching staff pitching always wins pretty much. I feel like they have more of a skill set pitching staff that I feel like can advance in the playoffs and can make a pretty big push. Colorado, I feel like, is still a young team. I want them to break through this, but if I pick a team to falter, it is going to be Colorado over everyone right now. First off, I've seen it before with them. Then again, their offense has been not what you figured the Colorado Rockies offense to be over the past 5 years. They are having trouble scoring runs at home, on the road. It doesn't really matter where right now. And you never really associated that with them. They face a very tough schedule in the month of September, in the fact that they have to play Arizona and the Dodgers multiple times, I feel like. That's going to be very difficult however you roll it out. It can be beneficial if they win, but if they go on a losing streak, it's going to destroy them. Their pitching staff is young. I like it. I mean, John Gray came back from the minors, and he's been lights out. Marquez has been, these last 7 starts for Marquez, he's been a top 10 starter in all of Major League Baseball, and people have not put that together yet. His skill set has changed. He's done something. He's actually put things together. The bullpen has been pretty god-awful, and with all of this negative stuff that I've just said, they're only a game and a half of the wild card. But I do feel like the youth there that they have is because when you look at it, they're still relatively a young team. They're a young playoff experience team when you look at it as well. I know people think, oh, you have to be 30 years old to be a experienced player. You could be 30 and never touch the plahavs, and you don't have any experience in clutch games then. I mean, I think
unfortunately, Bruce, you're an example of that. Being 30 years old and never seeing the playoffs. Unfortunately, personally, that is your experience, because I believe you have not been in the major leagues, have you?
Yeah, exactly. And and that's what I'm saying. Overall, like, I look at it as some of those guys, like, they've been playing, and some of them are getting discredited for what they do because they don't reach the playoffs because their teams haven't been the greatest. And I've just seen Colorado falter the past few years. I really hope it doesn't, because I'm in Colorado, but I have a feeling that's the one team that's going to fall. If there's going to be a young team out of them, I think that's the one that's going to fall.
Mm-hmm. So, to my thoughts, I agree with you guys on Philly. With the experience that they've been bringing in, I think that they can overtake the Braves, and if not, perhaps they could sneak into one of the wild cards. And it's because I think one of the team that will falter, and we haven't mentioned them, is the Cardinals. And it's because of the weird trades, I think, that they made right at the trade deadline. And the prospects have done very well that have come up. But now that it's September, and for prospects, it's playoff time, but after that playoff time, which is towards the middle of September, they could falter because, plain and simple, they could be tired. So I really think that Philly is the team that you will see put up, and I think St. Louis is the team that will unfortunately shut up. And I have one of my super fan, actually, that's been on the show a couple times. His name's Alex DeWitt. If you've listened to any of the shows, he's a big St. Louis Cardinals fan. So I guess I have to stick it to him a little bit because I talk about that. But I really do think that St. Louis is a team that I don't know. I don't see them consistently continuing this pace.
The pitching staff is my biggest worry on that one as well. You have Mikolas, Gant, Gomber, and Flaherty. I think it says Adam Wainwright might start next week. I'm not excited about that. Carlos Martinez got sent to the bullpen. I mean, that was your shining beacon on that pitching staff. You were planting your flag on Carlos Martinez, saying he's our staff ace, and he's in the bullpen at this point. That's tough. I have a tough time seeing this team continue his pace, but when you take a look at it, Mikolas, he's 30. He doesn't maybe have the most MLB experience, but he played in Japan. He has experience. Him and Flaherty, they're putting up really solid seasons right now, and if they continue to pitch the way they do, that might be one of your stronger 1-2 punches out of the National League when you take a look at the teams in the wild card race, at least. That could be a very formidable 1-2 punch there.
Johnny, anything to add?
As far as the West goes, if we're looking at the West a little bit too, Bruce touched on it with Colorado. I still like Arizona out of the West. I think they, aside from their bullpen hiccups the past week, especially against the Dodgers, when they lost 3 games by 1 run, I mean, I honestly think they're the most well-rounded team, probably aside from the Cubs, in the National League. With Corbin and Greinke at the top of that rotation, and when they have Bradley, Hirano, Boxberger in the bullpen, they have Goldschmidt, who's one of the best, I mean, aside from Freeman this year. With Votto, he's the best first baseman in possibly baseball.
Just take out April, and Goldschmidt's an MVP candidate.
Exactly. I mean, Peralta's been great. Pollock stayed healthy. I mean,
that's some good fish, so that's good.
They're a very athletic team, and if I'm not mistaken, they're one of the best defensive teams in the National League, which helps their pitching staff, obviously. But I'm just saying, I see Arizona winning the West. I know they're a game behind LA right now. Because they lost 3 out of 4 to them. But I think when it comes down to it, I think Arizona's going to take the West. I think Philly's going to take the East. The Cubs will take the Central. And if I had to predict a wild card, I would say Milwaukee and the Dodgers.
Yeah, my mistake. They are 1. I was looking at wild card games back, and it said 2. They are 1. And I'm not sure if you missed it there, but Pollock's looking good. That's a good fish. Tried it a few times before.
Yeah.
With that,
I still like the Dodgers in the NL West, though. I mean, we talk about a pitching staff: Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, Alex Wood, Rich Hill. I mean, that's nasty when you take a look at it. Health is a big thing there. They have one of the deepest I feel like one of the deeper and veteran teams as far as like offensively goes. When you look at who they're pumping out there with Manny Machado, Justin Turner, Brian Dozier, it's almost a who's who in that lineup, and I feel like they're going to be super tough down the road because I think veteran leadership and whatnot, I think a lot of that plays in September.
Yeah, and then last week, Walker Buehler pitching against the Texas Rangers. I mean, once a rattlesnake bit Walker Buehler, and after 3 days of pain and suffering, the rattlesnake died. So, a little side note about Walker, the Texas Ranger, Chuck Norris, which I'm a huge fan of Chuck Norris facts, believe me. So, with that being said, you guys, is there any final questions you have for me, and if you have anything to add to this wonderful podcast?
I just want to, if we could plug our site and everything. I mean, we're on Twitter at the Scorecrow, and our website right now is thescorecrowsports.wordpress.com.
Okay.
Bruce is the head of the MLB department and the fantasy baseball department. I'm the co-founder with my buddy the Mage. He deals a lot with fantasy football, but we do baseball, football, basketball, fantasy baseball, fantasy football. We been putting out NFL previews 2-a-days for the past couple weeks. Actually, they end up tomorrow. We're going to be doing NBA with that too.
Okay.
So thank you for having us on. I appreciate it, Tom. I really do.
Oh, you bet.
Thank you.
Been a great pleasure to have you guys, and I might have to bring in some more people from the Scorecrow, including that Sports Talk Nick, I believe is his name. Is he do a lot of football?
Yeah, he does football and basketball. Yeah. He'll definitely want to come on, I'm sure.
I'm not sure if he looks like Stephen A. or if he looks like Rogers from his
I have no idea what he looks like. Yeah, he's a character, I'll tell you that. But yeah, definitely. Once the NBA rolls around, I mean, if you do anything NBA or NFL, let us know. I mean, we have a department set up. We have heads of the departments, and we have it all set up, split up. So DM us at the Scorecrow, and we can set something up definitely.
Sounds like a plan. So he is Bruce Cagle Jr. and Johnnie Black, and this has been another wonderful episode of the Tom Green Podcast.